Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. I know it's been a minute since I've made a video. I've been really busy, life happens. Hopefully I look forward to making some new videos for you and updating you guys just like I always have. But this particular video is of a serious nature, and it's sort of a follow-up to maybe one of the last videos I made informing you guys of when my son had that really unfortunate interaction with the NYPD here in New York City. But since then, what I didn't tell you, within a week's time, my son had actually two really unfortunate interactions with NYPD. So it was a situation when he was asked to participate in a lineup, and then there was this other situation where he was actually stopped by the police. So within a week's time, it was still in the winter. He actually had the day off. As I told you guys, I have 3 children. My son is 17. I have a daughter who's now 12 and a little guy who is 9 years old. So my 17-year-old son was actually off of school this particular day. He attends Catholic school here in New York City. And it was a day that he actually had off of school. Now, Catholic school and New York City public schools operate on a similar schedule, but they can be different at times. And around those snow days, Catholic school opted out of school a few days that traditional public school decided to continue to have class. So on this particular day, it was actually a Wednesday, I remember, because he was actually on his day off, chose to go to church to kind of help out with some video work. So at this particular day, he was off of school and he was headed to our church, which is located in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn. And about at the Atlantic Avenue Center train stop, which is the Barclays Center, he was approached by a police officer. At the time, the police officer asked him his name, asked him where he was headed. He said, told him his name, showed him his school ID, which was Bishop Ford at the time, which is now closed. However, he showed him his school ID. He told him that he was off of school and that he was headed to church. The officer proceeded to ask him questions and then started to take down his information. My son asked, could you please call my mom? She's going to kind of really feel upset and, have concern about me being stopped by the police. The officer said, I'm not arresting you. I'm not giving you a ticket. I'm just taking your information. So my son was very sensitive. Could you please call my mom? I'm on my way to church. This is my school ID. And, my mother's going to be really concerned. Then my son proceeded to ask for a copy of what the officer was writing. The officer again told him, I'm not giving you a summons. You're not being arrested. I don't have anything to give you a copy of. I'm just taking your information. So my son requested to take a picture of what the officer had documented about him with his camera on his cell phone, which the officer allowed him to do. The officer took the information and let him go. So at this point, he calls me. He's like, Mom, I just was stopped by the police. I asked him to call you. I told him I was headed to church. He took my information. He said he's not going to do anything with the information, but he took it. I just wanted you to know. So I said, okay. So he said, Mom, I remembered. I noticed his badge number, and he had provided me with the badge number. And he also remembered the numbers that was on the officer's collar, which usually indicates which precinct area that they belong to. So I did a little homework after he called me, and I was able to identify where the officer was from, and I proceeded to call that station because I wanted to know why he stopped my son, since he really didn't have any answers for him. So interestingly, I was able to call the precinct, and I actually spoke to the officer. So I reminded him that he had stopped my son earlier that day, and I really had concerns about why he stopped him, that he had taken a lot of information and what he was going to do with that information. The officer said, I'm a truant officer. He was outside during school hours, and I'm really not going to do anything with the information. So I wanted to know, if you're not doing anything with it, why do you need it? He had my home address, my information, and my son really had requested that you call me so that we could have resolved that he wasn't truant and he was actually on his way to church on his day off of school to help out. So the officer again said, ma'am, we're not going to do anything with this information. We're not allowed to store information in any databases. It's just that I'm a truant officer and he was out during school hours. I said, okay, but he wasn't truant. The officer said, I understand that, miss. And we're not going to do anything with the information. So I took the officer at his word. He wasn't going to do anything with the information. So About 2 weeks later, I get a telephone call from this precinct, which is like the transit bureau somewhere in Crown Heights. I can't remember off the top of my head. But they were calling to offer me services for my truant son. Yeah, exactly. I was livid, to put it really mildly. Now, in no way, shape, or form am I anti-police. And I just want to be very clear with that. I have studied criminal justice. I actually have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I worked in law enforcement myself. So in no way am I anti-police. I support community policing. I support police. So I don't want this to be a situation where it's perceived that I am police bashing. But I do have serious concern about questionable, inefficient police practices. So, anyway, I'm speaking to this person and I'm like, my son, I don't have a choice. I don't even know what and for a split second, I even forgot about that whole situation. She's like, your son was stopped at this location and we are calling to order. I said, I don't have a truant son. And I'm really appalled that I'm receiving this call because on this particular day, I spoke to this officer and I informed him that my son wasn't truant, and he said that this information was going no further. The officer who I spoke to at the time was offering some type of like community programs for you to deter them from, I guess engaging in other risk type of behaviors, and I was livid. So, when I got home that evening, I talked to my son and asked him like, well, what do you want to do about it? And he was very upset because he remembered I kind of confirmed to him that nothing was going to happen with this information. So we decided to file a civilian complaint review board. We decided to file a complaint with the civilian complaint review board. So this is the New York City CCRB, and these are the folks charged with investigating these type of things. So I proceeded to file a complaint because it happened to my son and he was 17. They asked that he call as well. So he eventually called and they accepted our complaint, and the officer and the investigator got back to us and offered us the option of having a mediation session with the police officer as opposed to a full investigation. And I introduced that idea to my son and explained to him what the mediation process was, and he said he was fine with that. So eventually we got our day with the Civilian Complaint Review Board where we had our mediation session with the police officer. And so during the session, so it's the mediator, who's an independent person, my son, myself, as well as the officer. So it's real interesting dynamics. Very young Hispanic officer. And it was just really an interesting meeting. So the mediation session began with the mediator asking the party who brought the complaint forward to kind of speak to why we were here and what we hope to achieve. And just the mere fact that we were there, I said as a parent, I accomplished my mission. This particular officer took my son's information and documented it and created some type of paper trail with my son. And so the fact that we were sitting there in that session with the officer, he was now attached to a case with the Civilian Complaint Review Board with his name and a case number. And at some point, I'm assuming if he's up for some type of promotion or if he wants to move along in his career, that there's a file being kept that they're probably going to look at, hopefully how many times he had been called down. And this would be something that would impact his review, because you can't just go creating these situations for young black males like it's okay without any accountability. And I wanted to show my son that everyone is accountable to somebody, and to give him an opportunity to say what he possibly wanted to say that day, but knew that he couldn't in fear of it escalating to something that wouldn't work out good for him. So when my son had the opportunity to talk, it was very interesting. He said to the officer, every young person is not doing the wrong thing. You can't judge one young person based upon all young people. He said, I offered you my ID. I insisted that you call my mother, and I told you that I was on my way to church. And I interjected and said, quite honestly, a person willingly given ID, insisting that you call their parents and saying that they're on their way to church are probably not the signs of a person somewhere and doing something that they're not supposed to. And if he didn't kind of approach my son with this one-size-fits-all approach and thought process, he might have been able to kind of look at it through that, at that perspective. So, I was very proud of my son. And he said, because the police officer was saying, well, you have rights. And my son said, yeah, we do have rights. But if I were to start to speak to you about my rights in that moment, what would you have done? He said, yeah, we do have rights, but you're intimidating just because you have on that uniform. And I can't start exercising my rights when you have me. He wasn't pinned up against the wall, but my son basically said he made it clear through his body language that he didn't have the option to walk away and leave just because he wanted to. And so I just was extremely proud of him, because that's really how it is. And so I make this video in light of the whole Mike Brown situation as a way, it's a remedy, it's one solution that we must teach our young people, that there's a way that they can stand up for themselves, that they do have rights. In this meeting with this officer, it really took, I want to say, a good 20 minutes through dialogue for him to even get it. He was so accustomed and comfortable with just randomly stopping youth and nothing happening that he didn't even get what he did wrong. He didn't even get it. And I even said to him, he said, well, I'm a truant officer. I said, well, as a truant officer, at minimum, while I understand there are different scopes of schools, there are different kinds of schools, but as a truant officer, at minimum, I would expect that on any given day, not maybe specific schools, but, based on categories, traditional public schools, Catholic schools, which make up the largest part of, the school system here in the city, but you would at least know at minimum which schools are open and closed. In the morning when they're doing their muster roll, and they're giving their assignments for the day, do they not say, well, today is Tuesday, whatever the date is, and today New York City public schools are closed, so you may see some young people. At minimum, you would have the New York City Department of Education's calendar, and I would think the Archdiocese of Brooklyn calendar, at minimum. So the fact that you're coming out to police, it's not like you are part of the detective squad, or maybe he was a part of the, robbery squad. You are a truant officer, so your business is students. So if you're not at least equipped with at minimum, which schools are open and closed on any given day, it's a disservice that you're doing to the community. And so, after, like I said, almost a half an hour of dialogue, he finally got it. And, his whole body language had changed, because initially he was a little arrogant, like he didn't understand why he was down there. And then at one point he was like, well, ma'am, I'm a good guy. And I'm like, I don't doubt that. But since we don't really have dinner together, whether or not you are a good guy is not really important to me. What's important to me is quality policing. What's important to me is that you are treating young people with dignity and respect. And that, like my son said, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. And that every young person who's outside is not doing something wrong. And at the end of that session, the officer was very apologetic. He said, I should have gone an extra mile. And he was like, I really wish I didn't stop him. And he remembered my son and remembered the entire interaction that day, which I'm really proud. But, like I said, this is a video to help inform our young people about how to stand up for themselves. And the fact that he was so surprised that he had been called down to the Civilian Complaint Review Board to justify himself to us, and it gave my son a platform to respectfully respond to how this officer made him feel, I am extremely proud, and I felt like mission was accomplished. So if anything, talk to your young people. Educate them on how to handle themselves when they're interacting with the police, but also follow up. Don't just get angry. Don't just get mad. Teach them how to advocate for themselves. Teach them how to follow up. So although there was no real disciplinary action for the officer, my son had an opportunity for his voice to be heard. He learned a process that everyone is accountable to someone, and he was able to express how he felt about being treated in that instance. And for that, I am grateful for that process. So teach your young people, follow up. Parents, if your children tell you that they were stopped, don't take it lightly. Don't let these police think that parents are not concerned about their children, because that was the message that I got from you, officer. And also from the officer that had initially called me to offer the services. Like, we stopped hundreds of kids a day, and they were extremely surprised that I took it that far. And I said, you know what? Every time my son is stopped unjustly, we will meet here. So get comfortable with seeing me. And the officer said he, really hoped not to see me again. And that he learned from that process. And that the time of day that he saw my son, he remembered it wasn't hectic. It wasn't like it was like in the middle of any rush hour. And he could have taken the extra time. He could have called the school just to verify that the school was closed. And he could have called me. And so the fact that we walked away with that understanding, I truly believe he learned something from it. I truly believe my son learned something from it. And I truly believe that the process worked in that instance. So please, I'll leave links in the description box on a civilian complaint review board. If you're a part of PTAs, if you're a part of youth groups, teach these young people that do not get into verbal altercations with police, but there are ways that they can follow up and be heard. Not to feel like they don't have rights. They do, because they do. However, they need to be smart about how they interact with the police. And parents, follow up. Never get too busy to follow up and to model to your children the right way to approach the system. Sorry if it feels as if I'm rambling, but this was something that has really been on me to kind of post, because there are options, and this is a way to begin to hold the police accountable. So thank you for watching. Again, if you have relationships with young people, if you know people who have relationships with young people, please share this video. Please understand that process. Please learn about the process. CCRB, Civilian Complaint Review Board, they will come out and they do presentations. They have a whole community office that want to inform more people about this process. Utilize this process. This process was developed out of all of the stop and frisk that was happening in our Black communities. So we have to take advantage of these opportunities before they are no longer there. And if we start hauling officers down to the Civilian Complaint Review Board more often for these stop and frisk, they will have to change the way they police our communities. So again, happy holidays. In light of all that's going on socially, let's be aware, let's be vigilant at, figuring out strategic and smart ways to approach the racism, to approach how this prey on Black and brown children continues. And let's work together, let's work peacefully, and let's be creative in coming up with ideas. Don't feel comfortable. Don't feel like you have to accept it. However, think about smart ways to address it and teach our young people, because they are the leaders of tomorrow. And they need to be equipped with these tools so that they know how to handle themselves. So be blessed, enjoy your holiday, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.